Hey guys, Chris here, and I'm Ukrainian Canadian. Today is August 2nd, 2024, and let's get to the news happening in Ukraine, shall we? Let's go over Crimea first. We have some good news, and the Ukrainians attacked again the Crimean Peninsula, striking 4 Russian Triumph S-400 air defense systems, which are extremely expensive. We know that the Ukrainians have the ballistics, the American ballistics, and they've been utilizing them pretty often to destroy very expensive Russian assets because the ballistics themselves are very expensive. Of course, we're talking about the ATACMS, and so Ukraine can only use them against worthy assets that Russia has. And this is a really expensive asset that the Russians lost overnight. One S-400 unit costs around $500 million USD. So by losing 4 of them, they've lost $2 billion. So it's a huge loss, an insane loss for Russia. And again, as I've mentioned many times in the past, Ukraine will continue attacking Crimea because it knows that Russia continues to pour its own resources and assets in Crimea. It doesn't have the choice because they need that first line of defense to protect the other regions within Russia from Ukrainian drone strikes, Ukrainian missile strikes, etc., etc. So Russia will continue, fortunately, pouring very expensive systems and losing them because they have no ability to counter the ballistics that are being launched against them. Additionally, to be taken with a grain of salt, of course, but Budanov noted that they're currently planning the operation to destroy fully the Kerch Bridge, and this operation could very well take place in the next few months. Of course, we've talked about it. We're hoping that by the end of this year, Ukraine will be able to destroy the Kerch Bridge, but we also know that Budanov has said a lot of nice statements in the past, and they didn't come to fruition. So, of course, we need to take this with a grain of salt, but we know how important it is within the Ukraine military to destroy this bridge. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is going to happen very soon, and perhaps in October, which will celebrate the 2-year mark when Ukraine first struck the Kerch Bridge. And it was a pretty devastating blow for Russia because although it didn't fully shut down the bridge long term, it still destroyed a pretty big span of the bridge, which forced the Russians to lose one of the vital links between Russia and Crimea for a few months. But this time it needs to be the one where the bridge is completely destroyed. At least a very long span of the bridge, so Russia will simply won't be able to repair it quickly. So overall, lots of good news in Crimea, and Ukraine will continue attacking the peninsula because Russia is pouring resources there to defend its territories. Furthermore, let's talk about the problem that exists within Russia. Now, this is not a problem that is in Russia alone. This problem is also in Ukraine, but Russia is definitely feeling it more. And you can see that Russia simply cannot find enough people to mobilize or conscript or sign to join the military. And you can see that, according to this map, Russia has doubled the federal signing bonus from 195,000 rubles to 400,000 rubles in most of the regions. In certain regions, like Moscow, St. Petersburg, the pay is up to 1.5 million rubles. Now, the equivalent in USD is 17,000 USD for the 1.5 million ruble sign-up bonus, and for 4,600 USD for the 400,000 ruble sign-up bonus. So you can see that the majority of the oblasts and regions in Russia have this minimum of 400,000, and this is truly massive for an ordinary Russian. Remember that an average monthly salary for Russian in Russia today is around 80,000 per month. So 400,000 in the get-go is a massive amount for them. But word of mouth gets very quickly, and of course it goes around quickly when you lost over 600,000 men and women in this war, and I'm talking about Russia. So 600,000 casualties, whether it be killed, wounded, or missing in action. So this is a massive loss for the Russians. And of course, now more and more Russians start realizing that this entire special military operation is utter BS. It's not going according to plan, and the one-way ticket isn't worth it anymore for them. Even if they get paid 1.5 million rubles, what's the purpose if they won't be able to enjoy that money, right? Because after a few days, they'll get wiped out by a Ukrainian drone in the front line. And this is exactly what happens. The lifespan of a Russian soldier is less than a week. because they always get thrown to the front lines. They have a 2 to 3 week maximum training in Russia, and then they get, they get transferred to the front lines right away. And so everybody starts to realize that it's just not worth it. And this is going to be a much bigger problem in 2025 for Russia as the economy is going down the drain for Russians and the manpower shortage. I think that really next year the Russians are going to start feeling the consequences of everything that they've helped start in Ukraine. That is not to say, of course, to be fair, that the problem isn't happening in Ukraine, but Ukraine at the very least is fighting an existential war against Russia. And we also need to remember that Ukraine has 4 times less the population of Russia, and many Ukrainians left Ukraine in the beginning of the war. So that reduced quite dramatically the amount of Ukrainians that can fight in a war. At the same time, Ukraine also needs to keep its economy going. So you can understand how much of a difficult task that is for Ukraine. And to expect that Ukraine can somehow invent or create hundreds of thousands of troops, it's not going to happen, right? It needs to maintain a balance, which is why we're seeing that there is a problematic on the Ukrainian side, and also mobilization that hasn't been started, that should have started over a year ago, but only really started as of the last few months. So this is also a big problem for Ukraine. But certainly the most important thing here is that for Russia, this is clearly not what they were planning, that we're now heading into year number 3, and they're simply incapable at this stage to really raise a large enough army to conquer Ukraine entirely. You can see that, yeah, they might move here and there in Pokrovsk, as I've talked about. They might gain some farm fields and some small settlements, but they'll never be able to capture huge cities and huge territories. Because the amount of losses they've been having, their economy is also going down the drain. Russia won't be able to do that. So this is good news for Ukraine as well. But to be fair, both sides have the same problem. Now, last but not least, the prisoner swap. There was a very surprising news yesterday, and that was the fact that Russia and the West, that is the United States and NATO countries, partook in one of the largest prisoner swaps since the Cold War. Essentially, Russia exchanged political enemies of Russia and journalists for their own criminals. The Russians that were basically brought back home by Putin were spies, criminals, and assassins. And he even greeted them with a red carpet when they arrived back to Russia, which was kind of a joke. He wanted to make a big scene out of that. Like, look how Putin is bringing back home the boys. And what is interesting here is that, of course, a few months ago, if I remember correctly, or I think last year actually, the Wall Street Journal reporter Evan was arrested by Russia. And additionally, there were many other, whether it be journalists or political opponents that were arrested. And I think that Russia's really found an effective tactic to continue snatching essentially, foreigners that they consider to be spies or journalists or whatever, and so that they can exchange them to their uncovered spies in Europe. And so I believe that this is going to continue happening in the future. I wouldn't be surprised if there's other prisoner swaps. But you can see the contrast here is that Russia essentially is proving that they have spies everywhere in the West and the United States and other countries. And it's really an indication that we need to be careful along with the with this in mind, because we know that Russia is conducting a hybrid war in Europe by doing cyber attacks, killing, doing assassinations on important figures. We've talked about Russia trying to kill the CEOs of the largest defense industries in Europe. So Russia has a lot of these spies and sleeper cells in Europe specifically, and this is worrisome because, of course, that gives them a lot of leeway to conduct various operations. So we need to be very careful and mindful of that. Before I end this video, I also wanted to confirm that we spoke about it last week, but there was an ambush operation by the Tuaregs in Mali over the Wagner forces, and it was a devastating loss for the Wagnerites. They lost over 80 men, and 15 of them were captured. Lots of APCs destroyed, and even a helicopter was destroyed as a result of that. Russians were quick to ask for revenge, but that's not going to happen. Nobody wants to go to Mali. And it's been confirmed by the Ukrainian forces that they were behind this operation in helping the Tuaregs and the locals in ambushing the Wagnerites. So this is excellent news. What a brilliant operation by Ukraine. And this is not the first time we've heard about it. Ukraine sent special forces in Sudan to counter Wagner forces there. Now it's in Mali. And also this week, there was a video that was released by Ukrainian special forces and secret services showing an attack on a Russian Syrian airbase in Syria. So this really indicates to us that Ukraine is showing the counterbalance effect on Russia. Russia thinks that they can just go in countries like in the Middle East, in Africa, like Mali, Syria, and they can just do whatever the hell they want, get the deals they want, and essentially reign terror over local populations and being unrivaled by that. But Ukraine shows that they have force and influence in these regions, and they are planning to also counterbalance Russia as well in helping these locals in fighting against the oppressive regimes that are helped and supported by Russia. So this is really important. As long as Ukraine doesn't pour massive amounts of resources, I think this is a really important operation by the Ukrainians, because this war isn't just about Ukraine. It's about many different regions not being converted by Russia into dictatorships and authoritarian, having authoritarian governments. So that's really important. I think that Ukraine is doing a really great work on that end as well, albeit it's not destroying the entire presence of Russia, but that is showing that you're not going to be safe there either. So let me know what you guys think. And also, speaking of that, we know that in Venezuela, there was a fraudulent, rigged elections. Again, Maduro presented himself as the overall winner. He's been the dictator for over a decade there. And there were massive protests in the last few days in Venezuela. And there was a video that was shared of Wagner forces being present with the Venezuelan state police to essentially brutalize these protesters that are against the Maduro regime. So you can see that even in Venezuela, there could be some Ukrainian presence in the future. I wouldn't be surprised, because again, we know that Russia is trying to support these brutal dictatorships all around the world. So that's the video for today, guys. I hope you enjoy the update. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know your comments in the comment section and what you think about any of the topics I covered today. Again, a huge thank you for support. Please subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys in the next one. Slava Ukraini!